Yeah, actually, he was not. This used to be.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and you used to have to get a keyboard. Yeah, but we would do this, but it was always like, reserve the key for the keyboards. And it also. Quit. The computer. So,
I haven't seen that.
it's very possible.
Yeah,
It's here. Yeah.
I had a weird.
Forgotten about. I find the whole.
Any messages for you?
Well, I just started the web stream, so I'm trying to get it linked. So. I suppose that, yeah, I'm using this like way to copy and paste of my phone.
Will. My weapon is.
As far as perfect thing. Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's how you do it. You go get down, so it's kind of,
Yeah. But on the other hand.
I'm really happy everyone's away, everybody's like this week first.
Good.
All of the,
Yeah. Well, it's on the weekend, so you have 5, pretty much.
Oh. Tedious.
Good. So I guess that.
Okay. Right.
But you're keeping this, which one
I'm getting ready.
Yeah, well.
I think that's.
Yeah.
Love that sound. Yeah, okay, I'm going to. I'm gonna. Okay,
The autumn rain.
okay,
They go
right.
Anything else.
YouTube in particular. I mean, like, yeah, I checked Zoom. Zoom's fine. I'm really curious.
Well, it starts at 4:30.
There's a lag on YouTube actually. So I'm.
Yeah, I think the original was.
Wow, it's like a big lag. Wow. Wow.
I don't know.
There's definitely a lag.
It's typical.
Hello, yeah, just gonna keep saying it's a lag.
Just so many ways.
It's a lag. Lag.
You have your choice.
All manner of lag.
Good file balls or everything.
Okay, lag, more lags. It's
not a classroom.
Wow. Okay, there's only 10 second lag or something.
Yeah. One.
10 second lag, that looks like it's 10 seconds to me. Wow, very laggy.
So we, for a moment, especially, it's like. And I was breastfeeding, used to give hats, so I was also PA, and they would eat part there with, right, but I never had served this.
And I still remember what I actually got.
Yeah.
This last year link to everyone, like, it was on the email or whatever. Just to be not really say something you're saying doing and see a young woman pumping.
So, daughter from the dead guy, or my mom was there and waiting.
Good day. I see those. I can only imagine.
Well,
yeah,
I know that up in the new building.
Going on too.
Yeah, there's better reasons.
Doesn't have a lag.
I changed it out.
Yeah.
I don't think.
People have the.
Well, everybody knows.
Yeah.
Well,
So I can send it.
You.
If I do like this reply all.
I can send you, or I can send you a thing, I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, if you could just show me.
They like joined by Zoom.
I also
Actually,
it's
yeah.
got to see me better. So I can send the link and
He's,
be
you know, he's with it.
No, he's still in person. Oh, yeah,
I spoke with him all day, but.
somebody contacted me, like, sign up, so.
This, what do you call it?
Oh, yeah.
Discharge.
Wow. Yeah, this thing is not like picking me up.
So,
Okay, yeah,
that's super interesting. And he was basically like, I love taking.
But it
these
keeps
classes
out-
with those things.
sounds fun.
And I was like, well, why don't you just like.
Yeah, at least 20 seconds.
You know, they're old. They,
So.
they celebrate this.
Here, I'm gonna. I bet you already know about it. This is a very similar product, right? You just don't have.
Well, no, the link is not exactly.
Yeah.
I think.
So you can just grab all their emails.
Yeah, I'm sure why.
Here's some in the US.
I think that.
Okay, yeah, I have. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's easier. The kind of where there meets Rogers, yeah. Yeah, there's a point. Well, they have family.
This is true. And we were like, we did.
Okay, you should send a link or do like a line call or something.
Yeah.
Or.
Yeah.
That's great. I can just be.
Get the.
Because, yeah, because they look formatting.
I thought I sent you.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I also would send you like this.
okay.
So then if you grab the column and you know place and do like a PPC.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Or so just start at 3 and just like.
Yeah, I guess people want all have to do.
And then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, actually,
It's funny because I just now realized Lynn Sargent is
His daughter's
rather responsible for the ending of that. I can tell you later. Yeah. Because it's from her time when she worked at Cal State.
This is
Oh.
yeah,
All right,
we were hoping
okay.
that. And Dylan thinks so, but he said it, and it's not river and the daughter.
They're on, they'll be right.
Yeah, okay, that's right.
Super. So how folks who are using this.
Yeah, actually. We were walking with
When's the response?
children. Back then.
And we already, what kind of.
Yeah.
First time out.
On your.
I'm really missing around now. I'm not sure about night, but I just don't think I can't.
Today. No.
They were running around during seminars. We'll all face made some joke about how it was, around for seminar.
I'm not sure. Oh, okay, okay. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, that's
Hopefully by this time in the program, he'll be ready.
But not.
And then I'll make it out there. And then I'll look up. I just, yeah.
No,
I Yeah.
You know, yeah, that's what
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I think that one might be it because we were they're. Oh, they're most likely 20 feet. I those are. I believe. Actually, not even times. Yeah, they're all. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
Okay. One thing with sound flow, we have one thing still to figure out. So is that the only speaker that we have?
Yeah, I wonder what I can start off.
All right.
Yep. We sit here.
My name is.
I'm running this.
Well, yeah, this is so fun, you know.
I don't know, like, one of the curious might just use. Yeah. I don't know if I'll have to bring it up for more important people, but.
Well, we have a slideshow. Somewhere. Yeah. You do it now. I'll be in Chicago, but I need. It's really. if you have a spot yourself, you can just have them with you. Or find a food. Thank you so much for bringing those, they're beautiful. We are going to have, I'm very excited, thank you so much for being on the speaker. Thank you. So we will have the speakers stand right here if you're okay. You can stand anywhere you'd like. Yeah, we can move these. And then, so the camera will be capturing you from the side for the live stream.
Yeah, we're not live streaming it.
The book and put our flowers out.
So this is about the view that we're gonna be getting. Yeah, we can camera a little bit. Like, so yeah, it will, yeah, capture your main profile.
I have that for you.
Let everybody know. There's like a flag on YouTube, so hard to do anything. Yes, I'm.
Yes, actually, I was. Well, and I
Okay, because I am just afraid that, yeah. I would or already I. I'm going to be, I'm not sure how the Google thing works. I'm afraid if I, or better yet, it would be the file. So what? Yeah, it's just. Okay.
So you can share the screen on the
Let's start right this, or maybe you should. Yeah. Instead of this. I'm just afraid that if I log into Docs, it'll kick me out of YouTube. That's the only thing. Like, yeah.
When you're walking down the street, on the porch. And we did. Yeah. Yeah, should we sit? your water, you should be happy.
Nice to meet you.
Now share with everybody.
Yeah, let's see how that feels.
And then you're gonna share it on the screen.
Yeah.
Share your screen. And then do like 5 second repetition on this. You can just like show it and- Yeah.
I think I built a shell and green.
Like, you know.
Hello, friends. I'm Peter Holquist. I was one of bench students. I'll be speaking today. Welcome to all of you. We're going to be beginning in a few minutes. In the meantime, please feel free to take sweets, coffee, drinks, cheese. And if you've not done so, could you please make sure you sign in to the guest book outside? Thanks very much.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I just got out of the car and just drove hard right now. Hi, good to meet you.
So I, no.
Very long time.
Yeah. I just got out of the car. Oh, it's still kind of. But. But you know.
Like 30 years.
I think I did. 2 weeks ago. So. Drawn up.
Yeah, I did my understanding.
All right, I'm gonna.
Yeah, well, you know. It is like.
Okay.
Well.
A lot. It's like we. Cancel.
I'm really interested.
I will get a better look at you.
But, I mean, I'm fine with.
How about we put speakers in the back? Don't speaker.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Do that. Hi, everyone. Thank you. We're not starting yet, but if you chatted with me via email about the meeting, if you can meet in the back just for 2 seconds, we'll run through the order and things. You can start it up now.
Oh, that, yeah.
You're gonna have to listen hard because there's no microphone, our little robot. You're gonna have to listen hard because there's no microphone, our little robot. You're gonna have to listen hard because there's no microphone, our little robot.
Sorry.
Okay. All right, I think we're ready. I'm Edie Sarah, Ben's second ex-wife. He was my second ex-husband and hands down my favorite ex-husband. Larissa asked me if I would put together a playlist for this gathering, and I was honored to do so, but very quickly got overwhelmed at the enormity of it. So I just want to accuse myself before anybody else has a chance to, that this is a very skewed playlist. And I want to say a few words about it. Music, as you know, formed a huge part of Ben's life. His tastes ranged all over the map, literally. And he responded to music with more passion than most people are capable of. Music lifted and intoxicated Ben, and it was a form of joy that he loved to share with anybody who would listen. So among so much that's not included here are some really raucous tunes, harking back to Ben's coming of age in the 1960s, and that was a phase of his life that he never really lost touch with. For example, Creedence Clearwater Revival's Green River, along with Susie Q, which didn't make the final cut on the playlist, sped us home from a visit to the Simon Cancer Center last March. We were trying to cast off the pall that is not so great news the oncologist had just delivered. We were like drunken teenagers playing those same two songs over and over again, flying down State Road 67, chair dancing all the way from Martinsville to Gospel. The songs that did make the list supplied the background and sometimes the noisy foreground of dinner gatherings over the last several decades, where Ben would act as DJ, happily foisting his favorites onto the rest of us, whether we wanted to listen to it or not. All of them have lyrics worth paying attention to, but there are three that I want to single out. La Vie en Rose, the signature song of the chanteuse Edith Piaf, was Ben's mother's all-time favorite and one of Ben's favorites. Incorrigible romantic that he was. Van Morrison's Into the Mystic and Fats Domino crooning Blueberry Hill are both songs that Ben mentioned repeatedly over many years to me that he would like to have played at any memorial service that there might be for him in the future. So there you go, dude. I was taking notes. When the attending physician at Sloan Kettering told me Ben was unlikely to regain consciousness after the breathing crisis he suffered on the morning of October 23rd, I really didn't believe that doctor. He didn't know what kind of a fighter Ben was. It was still quite early in the morning. Emma and Nadja were on their way from the Upper West Side and from Queens, and Ben knew that before he slipped away. I was texting madly with Toma, who had to leave for her home in Vermont the day before. And following Toma's suggestion and the example of Larissa a few days prior, I broke out my laptop, got onto YouTube, and started playing DJ myself. Subtle expressions moving across Ben's face each time a new track came onto the machine promised me he hadn't left the auditorium yet. A few hours later, Blueberry Hill seemed to pull Ben up out of the depths. With Nadja and Emma sitting at his bedside, Emma was belting it out along with Fats Domino, and I watched Ben's blood oxygen rising out of the 80s into the 90s, and suddenly there he was, fully back with us, lip syncing, though we're apart, you're part of me still, for you were my thrill. He'd opened his eyes and asked for coffee, which we gladly gave him. And when we asked him if he wanted anything else, he gave us the best gift ever. And it was so like him, simultaneously generous and also hilarious. He said, "Everything just as it is." Everything just as it is. After all those weeks, he was struggling to get back to the Cape, back to Maine, back to Bloomington, to say nothing of Russia. He wanted everything just as it is. So I think grief is what happens to love when it can't find its way home. Ben's gone and we're still here loving him. But where can it go? All that love that's searching for him. There's no simple fix. But a gathering like this lets us recover him, at least for this time while we're all here in Valentine Hall, which today anyway seems to me a kind of weird academic blueberry. And I'm really grateful you're all here, and grateful especially to Mark, Larissa, Sam, and Colleen for bringing us all together. And I'm looking forward to seeing Ben today and all I hear you remembering about him. So thank you and thank you.
Thank you, Edie. You'll hear the playlist playing softly throughout comments, and then we'll all be able to take it with us. So we have the A-list longer version, and then we have the group playlist that we can all add to. So I'll be reading a little bit from my comments. Dear friends, thank you so much for being here today to celebrate the life of our beloved Ben Eklof, a friend, professor, mentor, colleague, neighbor, athlete, academic, and all-around good guy. Colleen Moore, here with us today, led a memorial for Ben at AC's this winter. Ben's family, who have joined us via Zoom today, plan to spread his ashes at family memorials to him in Cape Cod and in Stowe, Maine, this spring and summer. Ben's beloved daughters, Toma and Emma, asked that we celebrate his life here in Bloomington. Later, his cycling community friends will host a memorial bike ride for Ben too. Toma, Emma, Nadia, and the rest of the family are joining us virtually today and send their love. I had the honor of knowing Ben, or just Eklof as I called him, since my undergraduate days at IU. Of course, I called him Professor Eklof when he was my professor. I took intro to history with him, and then I took his Anna Karenina course. We kept in touch afterward, and like many of us, the relationship continued, kind of like a grandfather mentor to me. He graciously let me rent at, of course, too steep a discount. His Russell Road house studio, and then the Washington Street house that he later moved into. We spent a lot of time together during the COVID lockdowns with Edie and Michael and the whole gang. We stayed close friends, and I was able to visit him at the hospital, as Edie mentioned, this past October, just days before he died, because I know a few of you were able to too. As Ben's daughter, Toma, mentioned recently, when she asked him about a memorial, he was bashful and honored that something may one day be planned in his memory, but she could tell he'd be sad to miss the gathering of his dear friends. Although endlessly humble, I do think he'd have a goofy grin knowing how many of us are gathered here today and virtually in his honor. Folks have traveled as far as South Dakota, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois, and more to be here. And other folks are joining us virtually from the East Coast and even from, abroad. This full room is a testament to the many communities in which Ben was beloved by family, among childhood friends, his undergraduate and graduate school buddies, among academic colleagues and friends, neighbors in Bloomington, Maine, Cape Cod, running and cycling friends, and then also the parade of interesting and skilled handymen that Ben seemed to collect. Ever kind and thoughtful, Ben made friends easily and prided himself in being friends with all sorts of people from different walks of life. He wasn't one for spirituality, really, but he humored it a little bit. He was, in my opinion, the quintessential Virgo. We're gathered here today on a full moon. In her recent message, his daughter Toma shared that before he died, her dad told her he didn't believe he could visit her after death, but she made him promise to try if he could. And I'm sure we'd all appreciate a little haunting if he can swing it. So in any case, we're grateful to Ben for leaving us this wonderful healing gift, his wide, beautiful, varied circle of friends with which we can remember, celebrate, and miss him. We look forward to hearing the messages from folks here today. And there are many folks that I'll thank at the end who deserve it very much. But to get us started with comments, we'll have a message from Tony Cardoza, one of Ben's oldest friends. Tony first met Ben in 1970 when they started graduate school at the history department at Princeton University, where they shared a cockroach-infested apartment a block away from campus in 1971 and 72. That year marks the beginning of a close and enduring friendship until Ben's passing. Despite their disparate areas of research, modern Italy and Russia, their shared passions for historical debates, contemporary political issues, and cycling, as well as the geographical proximity between Bloomington and Chicago, allowed them to maintain their friendship over the next 50 years. And I told Tony, if he goes over his 5-minute allotment, that's okay, because he has 5 decades to share.
Thank you for putting me first. So much to say. I did the math, and since I knew Ben over 5 decades and have 5 minutes to talk to you, I could do 1 minute per decade, which was a hopeless undertaking. So I decided instead to just focus on the graduate years, since very few of you, I think, would have known him in that period. Let me say at the outset, and I think everybody knows this, Ben was a very complicated guy. But I would say that his virtues and his vices both rested on an abiding enjoyment of other people. That was a common feature of his life. Now, in focusing on the graduate school years, I pay a special attention to the years 1971 and 72 for reasons I'll explain. But even earlier, in the spring of 1970, I learned of Ben's strong political commitments, because in the spring of 1970, he and I and other people participated in a blockade of the Institute for, I'm going to say Institute for Advanced Study, but that's not true. The Institute for Defense Analysis at Princeton. But what's impressive about Ben is he refused to leave when the police arrived, and let himself get arrested and spent a couple of days in jail as a result. Certainly something that I was not prepared to do at the time. And I think that was a testament to how strong his convictions were. Well, let's talk about the cockroach-infested apartment. Because that was the year that Ben and I became very, very close friends, friendship that endured until his passing. Yes, it was cockroach-infested. Turn on the light at night and run around and kill as many I could in the kitchen. But Ben and I and one other person shared the apartment together. It was a small apartment. My bedroom was in fact the living room, but fortunately it had doors to it, so I could get some private. More complicated was the housing situation on the second floor, where Ben and the other roommate shared, or there were two bedrooms on the second floor. Ben had the one in the back, and the other guy had the one in the middle. So for Ben to get to his bedroom, he had to go through the other guys. And if you know Ben, there was a lot of traffic moving through this poor guy's bedroom on a fairly regular basis. Dinner. This is my recollection. It might be oversimplified, but my recollection is that every night we had the same thing. We cooked curried chicken over rice. And I don't remember complaining about it, but it became the regular feature. Needless to say, the apartment became a social center with a steady flow of friends and parties that whole year. After that year, we went our separate ways, in the sense that he went off to Russia, and I went to Italy to pursue, we each pursuing our doctoral research. And then, much to my amazement, when Ben eventually came back from Russia, he was married the first time. I couldn't believe it, but nonetheless, he was. Afterwards, I'm not going to speak about our cycling passion, since there's a number of other people who are going to be talking about the same thing. I will mention one other moment that sticks in my mind, and that was December of 1973 in Chicago. Ben, Nadia, and Toma, who I always called Miss Batutsky, came up and stayed with me that weekend in my apartment, which had no storm windows, and was up on the fourth floor, and was exposed on the west. That was the coldest weekend in Chicago history at the time, minus 24 degrees with a wind chill of minus 65. There was a lot of concern whether Ben's car would even start, because they had to drive them back to Bloomington that day. Fortunately, it did start, because other cars sounded like the oil had turned to sludge, but his car started and they made it back safely. So I think I made it under 5 minutes. I just wanted to say one other thing, and that's want to express my praise for this young woman over here, Edie, who I would describe as a rock of Gibraltar during the whole period that Ben was dealing with cancer, because it was Edie that drove him up to appointments in Indianapolis, that took him back to the East Coast for more appointments, that looked after everything. And that was really quite extraordinary. Now I have one last task. And for that, I'll even put on my reading glasses so I can see. I'd like to introduce Richard Durison, AKA Dick. Became acquainted with Ben as a grad student at Princeton, but they lost touch. When Dick moved to Bloomington years later, he recognized Ben as the person living right across the street. Having young families, Dick and Ben spent a lot of time together as their children grew up. His wife and Anna and Dick have known each other ever since. So I'll pass it on to Dick.
Well, I also first met Ben at Princeton. In fact, we had an adventure in the spring of 1970 as well. As some of you in the audience will remember, that was the year of the national student strike when Nixon invaded Cambodia. And Ben and I went up to Yale University, where there was a protest as part of that strike. And I tell this story as an example of how Ben is just an amazing person for being outspoken in a soft sort of way and very charming, and just doing things that have impact, and he doesn't even know it. Because this is what happened. We got off the bus from Princeton and we were wandering around. I should mention, on the way up, as we went through the ugly part of New Jersey, the bus burst out into America the Beautiful. That was one of my favorite moments. But we were wandering around the campus and just walked into an auditorium, and there were a bunch of people in the auditorium. It was a rather hairy crowd. And they were discussing what the demands of the student strike were going to be. And we were just standing there off to the side for a few minutes. And Ben raised his hand and he articulated very succinctly and precisely 3 demands, which I can't repeat for you. I looked for them on the web and they seem to have disappeared into the dustbin of history. But anyway, the next day, and shortly after he did that, we left. Then the next day, those were the 3 demands of the national student strike. And the amazing thing is, I asked him about it later, or I mentioned it to him later, and he didn't remember doing it. There may have been reasons for not remembering. But when that happened, I couldn't help thinking, who is this guy anyway? After Princeton, we went our separate ways, and I lost track of him. And then, as you've already heard, Anna, my partner, and I moved into a house on Lincoln Street. And I was sitting on the porch and I saw this guy going in and out of the house across the street. I said, damn, that looks like Ben. And I tell this story to Anna and she said, oh, you're imagining that. So I guess, I don't know which one of us talked to him, and it was Ben. Of course it was Ben. And that started a wonderful relationship. We both had young families at the same time, and so we spent a lot of time together. We would used to have these on holidays, or just for the hell of it, we would have these big dinners and invite people over who had children the same age. And these were great parties. I remember Ben having that gregarious, charming smile of his and a twinkle in his eye as he was interacting with people and watching the children play with each other. So that cemented a friendship, and we've been friends ever since. Anna spent some time with bicycling. She made that connection. I don't get on the damn things. We didn't see him much for a number of years recently, but fortuitously we happened to be in New York City when he was at the Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And thanks to our friends driving us over and parking like New Yorkers in a place where you're not supposed to park, and just sitting there in their car while we went up to see him, we actually got to visit with Ben. And on the way home, he talked to us on the phone in the car as we were driving home back to Bloomington. And he had this wonderful vision of being able somehow to make it back to Bloomington and spend time here. And it never happened, but it was one of the most wonderful conversations I've had on the phone in a car. Anyway, those are the things I wanted to share. And I don't know, is Bob Arnott here? It doesn't look like it to me. I didn't see him earlier. So I guess Sarah Phillips is the next person who'll be speaking. And Sarah got to know Ben best when she was director of the Russian and East European Institute at IU from 2015 to 2023. He frequently and cheerfully, there's that cheerful again, served on REEI committees. Sarah also knew him as a great storyteller, and at various on and off campus parties.
So recently in our household, a word came up that my 16-year-old was not familiar with. And that word is mensch. And he asked me, Mom, what is a mensch? What does that mean? And immediately, this guy popped into my mind's eye. So basically, I want to read you a definition. A mensch is a person who can be relied on to act with honor and integrity. But the Yiddish term means more than that. It also suggests someone who is kind and considerate. Rabbi Neil Kirshen characterizes a mensch, or menschness, as, quote, responsibility fused with compassion, a sense that one's own personal needs and desires are limited by the needs and desires of other people. A mensch acts with self-restraint and humility, always sensitive to the feelings and thoughts of others. Other characteristics include decency, wisdom, kindness, honesty, trustworthiness, respect, benevolence, compassion, and altruism. A mensch is driven by an innate decency, motivated perhaps by a sense of values to live up to, but not out of regard for recognition. They will act as a mensch at all times when it may be hard to be one. And that was precisely my experience of Ben Eklof as a colleague who, as was mentioned before, cheerfully served on every committee he was ever invited to serve on, and served as an example of generosity and what I will forever call Ben's menschness. And I would like to introduce Yusuf Noor, who met Ben first on a bike ride in 2014. They regularly rode together at least 2 days per year, year-round, 2 days per week, year-round. They became friends, and Yusuf enjoyed mingling with cyclists and other friends at Ben's Russell Road house.
Hi, everybody. As it was already mentioned, I met Ben on a Bloomington Bicycle Club ride sometime after I had started riding with the club in around 2013 or 14, I don't remember. Maybe a lot of bike riders here, a lot of BPCs are here, so maybe they will remember, maybe not. But we were both regular riders who rode with the club all 3 ride days of the week, unless we were out of town or out of the country traveling. Ben was a extremely strong rider. And at his even when he was older, got older, he would leave men who are and women who are half his age, especially up hills. This is how I and Ben bonded. On one afternoon ride, we knew that it was going to rain, but there was a window of opportunity of no rain, and we thought we could make it back in time before the rain started. But you know, those damn weather forecasts and their percentage. I recently found out that the way that meteorologists define percentage is different from the way we were taught in math class. That was really an eye-opener. So don't believe it when they say 50% rain at such a time. So we realized we were going to get rained on. And so it started raining on our way back about 6 miles out. By then, Ben and I somehow got separated from the rest of the riders. And we kept riding, hoping that the rain would stay light and not drench us. No, it didn't stay light. It did not. So we were getting wet. And right at that moment, we were passing by a house right beside the road with a porch, beckoning us to take shelter. And so I said to Ben, let's shelter there. And I guess many of you who know Ben would know the answer. He said no. And we were getting drenched. And the road, by then, I think we were in Monroe County. I could understand why he said no, because we just, I think, left Greene County. You guys know Greene County, right? So the rain got heavier, and finally, I repeated again. I said to him, let's stop. Let's take a shelter. So I've been here 38 years in the United States, but I still think and act like a typical Somali. Because to me, knocking on the door and saying, can I just shelter here? It's the right thing to do. But Ben knew better. In my crazy Somali way, I remember knocking on a door on a solo ride. I was riding by myself, and I knocked on the door. I really liked the way they built their they had this glass or what do you call a sunroom. And I really wanted to know how they did it. And so I knocked the door, despite the fact that in big letters on the door was a sign that said, "Go away." Only in America. Luckily, nobody answered my yeah, because I don't know. When I told my friends what I did, I say, "You're crazy." And I on a door that says, "Go away." Anyway, I and Ben kept pedaling. And after a while, I noticed that Ben was shivering. You know, as you still see in the pictures, Ben was one of those people who you could say, you know, this cliche, you know, somebody has less than an ounce of fat on their body. He was like that. He had less than an ounce on his body. And so those kind of people, they're disadvantaged that they don't have the blubber to protect themselves from COVID. So when I saw him shivering, I said, you know, man, let's shelter somewhere. And my son, well, I'll call my son, he'll pick us up and we can ride. And the answer was still no. He could be headstrong, you can imagine. But the rain got worse and we were getting drenched. Finally, he relented and we sheltered somewhere on the bike riders, you know, on Vernal Pike. We were coming back, I think, from a ride through Hendersonville, somewhere in that area on 43. So my son came and picked us up and he dropped us off at Ben's house on Russell Creek Road. Ben, of course, very, very generous guy. He invited us in for tea and we accepted it. And my son just fell in love with the house. Any of you saw that house? It's an amazing house. He fell in love with the house and he said, you know what, if Ben ever decides to sell this house, I want to buy it. You know, teenage pipe dream. But he went back and Ben allowed him to go back and take pictures of it. Before that, that's how Ben and I bonded. Before that, the only interaction I remember having with him was him telling me that Ben was not short for Benjamin, or Benjamin, as we say back home, but Benoit. And that was the only interaction I remember him ever before that rain. But from that point on, Ben invited me to his social gatherings, and he did a lot of social gatherings at his house. Now, I was going to tell you a story that some of you, because we're in academia, would think it's totally irrational, but I tell people that non-rational and irrational are two different things. So it may be non-rational, but I don't want to take up too much of your time, but it has to do with something that all bike riders here who ride with us in the off season, not the regular road season, those who ride with us in the off season in Hoosier National Forest and Brown County State Park at night. Those people would know when they hear me say at the end of the ride, and I'm putting my bike on the rack and the car, the car hitch, and I say under my breath, "You're not going anywhere." They would know, but I guess if you really want to know, then if you're curious about what happened, it has to do with a bicycle that I think caused the flooding in Ben's house. And for those of you, were you there when the house flooded, Larissa? Yeah, you were there. Yeah, it was more than once.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was the last time. And at the time, it was when he started riding the off season. So he bought a mountain bike. And so it got flooded and it rusted. So I bought it off of him. And immediately after as I put it on my rack, it actually got off the rack and I had to chase it downhill. Eventually, long story short, one night on the way back from a mountain biking ride at night, John was there, a number of the bike riders here were there. On the way back on 446, coming back from, what is it, what was the name of that?
Lake Monroe?
No, it was the horse camp, Blackwell. We were coming back at night and the bike decided they had enough of me. And it just, I had no idea what happened. It was gone. And the running joke, and the last person who would remind me of that running joke is Gail there, is that, tell me about the bike. It was the last time I saw that bike. It's thrusting away somewhere in the deep gullies of Fuji National Forest. And it reminds me of that Harry Potter story of, that, those of you who read Harry Potter, of that possessed car in the Forbidden Forest. Anyway, Ben, wherever you are, we love you and we miss you, especially at the bike rides. Thank you. Oh, yeah. I'm honored to introduce Greg, who are one of the bike riders. And Ben, Greg met them when he met Ben, same way as I met him. During a ride in Bloomington Bicycle Club in the summer of 2017. Craig was new to riding with the club, having just moved back to B-Town. Ben was kind in taking Craig under his wing and helping him with riding protocol. They quickly became good friends and spent a lot of time together on rides and grabbing dinners. They also shared teaching challenge.
Thanks.
Yeah, so Ben kind of took me under his wing. Was the summer of 2017. I came back to live in Bloomington after being away for 37 years. And Ben was just one of those people in B-Town that just welcomed me with open arms. And I think that's pretty much reflective of what everybody else has been saying. Just, he was just such a people person, and he just was so inquisitive about people and their particular lives and things. What stood out for me, I mean, we had a lot of dinners together. We came from very different worlds in a lot of respects, but we, both met on a lot of common ground. And the three things that I remember the most, and I think about, is he was such a gifted athlete, and I admired him so much because of just his dedication to fitness and wellness. He was obviously incredibly bright, an accomplished professor and a writer, a mentor to so many people. And the last thing is just the way that he faced his illness. We had a lot of dinners together. We were talking about it, and just his poise and his grace. I never once heard him talk about it from the standpoint of he's a victim. I mean, it was always optimistic, but at the same time, realistic, and knowing that, there was a finite end to this. And I just grew so much strength from him and just so much admiration from him. So Ben, I pray for him literally every single morning. He's on my prayer cards, and praying for him, during his illness, and he's just going to be so sadly missed. So thank you for being here. And I'd like to introduce Dan Hickey. Dan is a fellow professor here at IU. Also knew Ben within the BBC, and also a scholar in Soviet psychology. So thanks.
Probably the best thing that ever happened to me in my life after meeting my wife, Brandon, was moving here in 2005 to help start a new program in this discipline called Learning Sciences, kind of a new discipline in the School of Education. And I moved here, and I got in my office and pulled open this drawer. And there's all this stuff from Russia, which is weird because, like I said, so Lev Vygotsky, some of you may be familiar with it, a very, very influential Soviet scholar whose work was virtually unknown in the West after his passing in the 30s until it was translated into English in 78, and a very influential book called Mind and Society. In key respects, that book and Vygotsky's ideas form the core of our discipline of learning sciences. So this kind of blows my mind. And not only that, it's about Russian educational history. And here's a picture of Vygotsky's daughter. And it just blows my mind. I just couldn't believe, like, who's this guy? Who's this scrawny little Ben Eklof, and I see him with a bike. And thinking, oh, and I'd heard that, I was an avid biker when we moved here, and I'd heard that Bloomington Bike Club was this fantastic, welcoming group, and indeed it was. So it was just couldn't believe my good fortune. Within just a few rides, you know, I met Ben. So knowing him both as a biker, we've biked numerous times, and they mentioned mountain biking, which is important. The difference road biking, you don't really get to know people because you're supposed to be riding instead of talking. But mountain biking is different because yours portaging your bikes. And so you get a lot of time in cars with people. And I had many fascinating conversations with Ben, learning all about this big black hole in my discipline's history, because we don't know anything about what went on between 1934 and 1978. And Ben really helped flesh it out in his work in a fascinating way. He just told story after story and really helped us figure out what happened. Learned a lot of great things from him, really enjoyed his friendship. My family just loved him, had so many great times. Oh, so you've mentioned the Russell Roadhouse. Most of you don't know that used to be an ashram. The other thing people don't know about that house is it lacked a really important thing, and that's a foundation. That's one of the reasons why you had such a hard time selling it, because nobody will lend money to buy a house that doesn't have a foundation. So I miss him dearly. We bonded over our love of John Prine, our love of biking, our love of food. And I have not met, I understand Toma's online. I exchanged a bunch of emails and phone calls with her about our shared interest in education. I was so blessed in that way. My wife came and got me, and we took what was left of his carbon fiber bike after his wicked crash on South 37. And I met him and Tatiana in the hospital and was there for his recovery. And I saw Ben in October, which I believe was the day before his last day in Bloomington. And indeed, his grace was overwhelming. So anyways, I just want to say on behalf of everyone, on behalf of the Bloomington Bike Club, there's quite a few of us here. We're going to miss him. We love him. We miss him dearly. So thank you all for coming. I think now it's time for a musical interlude. Thank you.
A 5-minute break. So while you're listening to music, you're welcome to use the restroom, help yourself more refreshments, and then we'll start again.
Watch out. I feel like sound there, so there is good. I didn't mute it because I thought I was
Start again by 5:40 and then Higher octave, but you can.
Quiet in the room.
Okay. Welcome to the second half of our program. My name is Colleen Moore. Ben was my dissertation advisor here at Indiana University from 2004 to 2013. He was my mentor and my friend, and knowing him was one of the greatest privileges of my life. I also feel privileged to have helped with today's memorial and to be with you all here today. Our next speaker is Peter Holquist. Ben was Peter's undergraduate advisor at Indiana University from 1983 to 1986 and a friend of Peter's family. Ben wrote for Ben's application to grad school. Peter's dad and stepmom, Katerina Clark, who passed away just this February 1st, came to Indiana University in 1983 and were close with Ben and Nadia.
So I'm here to speak about Ben as an inspiring undergraduate teacher. It's just a great joy to see so many people here talking about the many sides of Ben's life, many of which I did not know about. I want to start by thanking Mark, Sam, Stepan, but especially Larissa and Colleen for all they've done to make this happen. My parents were academics. They were Slavists. They came to Bloomington in 1980, and they became family friends with Ben and Nadia because Ben and Nadia took them in and made Bloomington a home for them. They, at that point, had younger kids, and my brother Nicholas befriended and remains close to this day to Toma. I'm also a historian of Russia, and I got my start right here in Bloomington with Ben and Alex Rabinowitz. Ben was the instructor and mentor for me in the history department. He got to know me and I got to know him in a new role as instructor and mentor. It didn't occur to me then, it does occur to me now, that being both the son of a family friend and his student could have put Ben in a very awkward position. But he was entirely cool with it and just went on. I will say that it did totally weird out some other professors. My father was chair of the Slavic department. He had a passion for Russia, knowing it and understanding it. He really communicated that you couldn't know Russia by the book. You had to live it, be it, go there, know Russians, speak to Russians. My first teaching experience was with Ben as an undergraduate. Ben allowed me to serve as an undergraduate teaching assistant in a Soviet survey. And it was his passion for undergraduate teaching that was really communicated to me. Equally, I had my first experience working with archival materials with Ben Eklof. He asked me to serve as a research assistant over the summer, going through microfilms. Remember microfilms? We fortunately here in Bloomington had much better microfilm readers than existed in the Soviet Union of those days. But these were government reports on schools and instructors. This is when he was doing this book on schools and reading. We remained largely in contact through the Russian field. We would see each other at the annual Slavist convention, in the halls, or, as it is, over a beer. But in classic Ben style, he did not limit his interests only to the field. It was not only about academics. He would always invariably ask about how my brothers were doing, who are not in the Slavic field or academics. And it was not a formality. He was really sincerely interested in how they were. What remains with me is the twinkle in his eye and the wry smile, and the inspiration he's left in me and many. I will say what is the Russian saying for this: Вечная память, memory eternal, or Ben Eklof. We're going to break out of the schedule. Following me is virtually going to be Brad Woodworth, who had a course with Ben in his first semester in graduate school in the fall of 1992, which he remembers fondly and still influences him to this day. When Brad returned to IU to complete his qualifying exams, Ben let Brad and his late wife Sherry stay in his home.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be able to be here with you, even virtually.
I have to figure out the volume.
Just let me know when it's okay to go.
Okay, you could probably try calling in using phone. Yeah, music should know.
I'm sorry, you want me to call in on a line?
We're not. We don't have the same. Alright. Okay. We may have to do a little bit of a MacGyver thing.
Okay.
We shall try. All right, yeah, I'm gonna take the whole thing, all right.
Use the chat.
Same system.
Brad, can you try speaking?
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm really glad to be here, even though just virtually with you. And I'm sorry, I'm not in Bloomington. I first met Ben Eklof in the fall 1992 semester when I was in his graduate seminar in 19th century Russia. This course, in many ways, I think, set my scholarly career forward and gave it direction that it didn't have before. I think Ben set the standard for what a graduate seminar was all about. His own deep knowledge and the questions that we examined over the course of the semester, social as well as political, was so deep. But what I remember most was the conversational brilliance. Those of you that talked with Ben, that worked with him as professionals, know what I'm talking about. The high verbal intellectual standard he set in the course. I was so scared of looking dumb as a young graduate student. Ben had ways of showing how and what he thought of what you had to say, how he valued what you were saying, if his eyes twinkled or if they did not. And that twinkle, his respect, meant for me a really great deal. Ben helped build in me the sense that what we were arguing, and of course what we wrote about history, really mattered. He showed that the stakes for us as historians were high. It deeply mattered what your arguments were, that they were well-founded, well thought out, and you were not just blowing smoke. What the entire profession about mattered. It was so clear from his courses. He communicated that so deeply. On his office door was a graphic of a pre-19th century person writing something, a historian, and above the image was the text, "Kamuti apasin historic." To whom are you a danger, historian? Now, those of you who have graduates, those of you who are faculty members who have graduate students, especially PhD students, perhaps are able to make these kinds of environments, or at least try to create the kinds of environments that Ben did so easily in the classroom, where the doing of history really matters. Those of us who teach a lot of courses for general education credit and who are involved with other kinds of work at our universities though all that is valuable and important, maybe don't get to enjoy that quite so much. Perhaps to enjoy that kind of deeply rich oxygen that Ben just naturally brought to the classroom. And I so miss that. I miss that time in his classroom. Ben showed us students what it was that we were really doing, what it really was that we were about. Now, as was mentioned, Ben showed me and my late wife Cherie kindness several times, letting us stay in his home when I needed to come back to work on my dissertation in Bloomington before my defense. Ben took me running and biking several times. He was making that bridge between the relationship between faculty members and student to one that was between two colleagues. I'm deeply, deeply grateful to have been his student, and I even more deeply regret his passing. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging tight with us, Brad, but we figured out the audio. And thank you all for your patience. So as I mentioned earlier, I was able to visit Eklof in October, the weekend before he passed, and you'll be pleased to know that he was befriending, advising, and charming his nursing staff until the very end. You'll be heartened that up until the very end, as Edie mentioned, he was also asking us to run and grab him an extra hot latte every few hours. And although and warming it up in the microwave every few minutes too, if it wasn't extra hot. And although he deeply wanted to make it back to Bloomington to pass, I have to admit it was pretty metal of him to spend his last days in New York City, like on the Lower East Side, no less. Very cool. I was able to spend some very special moments with Toma too, chatting about life and having an afternoon cheesecake tea party with her and Professor Eklof. Before I left, I was able to read a letter that I had written to him, as well as a few notes from dear friends who had sent them as I made the trip out. And it was a supreme gift to be able to spend that time with him and he sent his love to friends near and far and was stressed and wanted to get messages out in those last moments. So, wanting to get those messages out. As you know, he fought hard to stick around as long as possible. So I'll just share a few parts of my letter. I tried to write thinking of what we would all want to say to him in those last moments. So, dear Eklof, how do you thank someone for having such a seismic impact on your life? I've been putting off writing this letter for years, my last essay for you. You taught so many of us, thousands certainly. Thank you for teaching us the content, which we loved, but also investing in so many of us as writers, researchers, and citizens of the world. Thank you for reading our papers and making us feel like we were smart, eloquent, funny, and had more to learn. I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling that you were a central force in my confidence and direction during those impressionable years, as we've heard over and over again today. Having someone hold me to a higher standard was an honor. It made me feel seen, heard, and understood in a way that we all deeply want. Thank you for doing that for so many of us, for seeing what we were hoping to become and helping us along our paths. Thank you for having that sick wooden octagon house out in the woods. You have incredible quirky taste in homes and art. That back porch on the Russell Road house was heaven. John and I, my boyfriend at the time, spent a whole summer out on the porch on the Washington Street house too. And all of us know there's nothing like the hug of a warm, balmy Bloomington porch night with good company. You let me pay way less rent than I should have, and I know I'm one of many people you showed that sort of generosity toward in many ways. Please know that we will be generous in your memory and that the ripples will keep growing. Thank you for being an advocate for Southern Indiana and for showing us the beauty of cycling on those back roads. Thank you for teaching me what you knew about cars too, which was buying them off of international students. Just kidding, but you do give good advice on all things. And your perspective will be sorely missed. I love your line about majoring in unsolicited advice in college, if you ever use that line with you. I'm sure we'll wonder what sort of advice you'd give, and we'll be able to summon your wisdom. It's a great honor to have heard about so many eras of your life, places you've lived and people you've loved. Not everyone has multiple ex-wives tending to them until the very end. But seriously, I've learned a lot from you about how to show respect for others and speak so highly of folks. Speaking of which, thank you for introducing me to your network of incredible friends, which continues even today. I loved hearing about the friends that I didn't get to meet. You really know how to collect great people. None of us can imagine a world without you here with us in it. I admire your steadfast, deep love for your daughters and the care you have for their lives. I've loved hearing about Toma's horse riding days and Emma's athletic prowess. Your stories of the girls and their gang of Lincoln Street friends running around for dinners at different houses always warm my heart, as Dan mentioned. or Dick, I think. We will miss your accent and voice, the unique blend of times and places that it draws on. We'll miss your wise quips and quirks and jokes. Thank you for all the time we've spent listening to music and sitting around chatting. Before you get too big of a head, I will also think of you when I see a kitchen glass that is quite cloudy and need of a rewash. You have lived a life you should be very, very proud of. You're known for your generosity, humor, wit, kindness, intelligence, good taste in art, music, food, and people, and a million other things. Thanks for the cast of characters you pulled together who will make this very hard thing just a little bit easier. Please know that we are here to shepherd you through, to support your family, and to keep your memory alive. You know the Russian word "pravajet," to take someone as far as you can to their destination as you say goodbye. It's an honor to walk with you in that way as far as we can. You'll be fiercely missed. Thank you for sharing your life with us. Next, we'll hear from Sean McInerney, who I know is a dear friend of the family and will introduce himself.
I make it through this crime, but I was in med for 40 years. I was a student first. He invited me to live with him and Nadja as his nanny for his 2 young daughters. Told and Emma, while Nadja finished graduate school. And I ran with him. I was a marathon runner. I ran many marathons with Ben. And Ben was a hell of a runner. He never was satisfied. No matter what place he got, he always wanted to do better. He just was competitive. And sometimes, if you're friends with another man, you can't get past the competitiveness. It's just the way things are. And he would sometimes say really strange things to me, like, and I was, boy, when I was a young person, I was totally withdrawn. I was pathologically shy. He would say, "You don't deserve to be as tall as you are." I don't have any control. You don't deserve this head hair. And just, is this, how do you respond to that? But, I learned to be a good parent first by being with his children. It's like Nadja. So when I became a parent and married my wife and Patrick were sitting in the back over here, it just helped me. Some of you had children who went to BDLC. I worked at BDLC. Ben recommended me for the job there. That's how I got the job. I worked there for 17 years. Influenced a lot of people. Bob DeGraff was sitting in the back. I taught with Bob. I've known Bob for 4 years as well. I think one of the hardest things, and I still have nightmares about this, so I went to see Ben. We were in New York City, and I walked to Sloan Kettering, and I saw him, I believe, about 4 days before he died. And I didn't want to see him that way. I've lost other people through cancer. My father had cancer. It's just horrible to watch somebody waste away. I know many of you have experience with that, but Ben just didn't seem like he could die. I mean, he just was a tenacious runner, tenacious biker. He just didn't give up. It just wasn't in his nature. And to watch someone waste away, I still have nightmares about it. But
him opening up his family to me. Meant to me. And I told him that the last time I saw him, and he died, I think 3 or 4 days later. And I told him I'd love to. And we joked, and I said, you know, if I had told you I loved you in 1984, you probably would have hit me. Because it just was, it was a different time. And, very few men worked at preschool at that time. It was, you were really an anomaly. And there were 4 men who worked at BDLC, and we became fast friends because it was like, who else are we going to talk about IU basketball with? You know, so we thought, you know, we became this clique. But he was a tremendous scholar. That goes without saying. The writer George Eliot said, "We never forget those who die, and we will never forget those who die unless we let ourselves do that." So if you want to remember Ben, I'm selling copies of his book. Pick him up at the bag. I'm reading his ex-wife's book, Nadja, who's a tremendous scholar in her own right. She's wrote a book about Chekhov's children. She's an amazing scholar. And to live in a house with such brilliance, and you know, I'm just this nobody kid from northern Indiana, you know, scared to go to college, away from home for the first time. And I know people who've written books. And I remember I took this book to my brother. My brother was also a history major. He went to the University of South Bend. And when we were running a race, a marathon, the South Bend Marathon, Ben stayed with my family. And my brother came up to him and said, "I read your book." And Ben said, "Oh, you're the one." And he said, "No, it's really, really good." And I said, "No, I read it too, so that's 2, you know." He was a tremendous writer. And I was also one of those handymen he picked up. Just because I could do some things and he needed help his last few months in Bloomington. And I was glad I was able to help them, and I just feel so privileged to be a part of his family. And Nadja, Emma, and Toma, if you're listening, I love you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lynn Sargent, and I had the privilege of working under Ben's supervision from 1994 to 2001 when I completed my dissertation. Currently, I'm the Dean of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences at South Dakota State University. So these days, most of what I do is answer email, go to meetings, and say things like, "What made you think that was a good idea?" So, but back in the day, 1994, when I first met Ben, it was kind of an interesting moment among sort of the Russian historians, both the students and the faculty, in part because the department had made a mistake that year. And they had admitted, I believe, if I recall correctly, a larger class of entering first-year PhD students. And then there were some students who had deferred admission who also enrolled. So it was a little thick on the ground with would-be Russian historians and East European historians. And there really was only one class that first-year students would be able to enroll in, which was Ben's colloquium on the Russian peasantry. So the very first time I met Ben was at that fall sort of mixer social event that the Russian Institute put on. And, you know, he met me and some of the other first-year students, and he was kind of like, "Oh, God, what are we going to do with you all?" And he actively tried to dissuade us from taking his class. You know, he's like, "Well, how's the Russian? You know, I mean, we're going to read a lot." And of course, because we had nothing else to take, he couldn't have pried us out of there with a 10-foot pole. I mean, we were just absolutely determined, but there were more than 20 students in this colloquium. So big lift for him, big lift for us. And one of the things that came out of that, and probably because he was trying to scare us away, didn't work, but he tried real hard, was an absolutely legendary syllabus on the Russian peasantry. We had the main reading every week, and then there was this list of additional readings that he wanted us to read. That syllabus circulated for years, if not for decades, because it was a work of art, and it truly kind of reflected his erudition, right? His depth as a scholar, but also the way he approached teaching, that he would give you, if you all you could take was sort of that first layer, well, he'd provide that for you and kind of get you to dig a little further. But if you would follow him down the path, there was this depth to his learning, and he was more than willing to share that. It was an absolutely tremendous experience. I will never forget that class as long as I lived. I was terrified the entire time. I didn't have an undergraduate degree in history. I could not remember when the French Revolution happened. It kind of came unglued every so often. And I was really afraid they were going to figure it out and kick me out of graduate school. But it was a wonderful, enriching experience. And I also still have the paper I wrote for that class. And one of the things I remember is, and I can't quote it exactly, but the comments he wrote on that paper. And you have to understand that I stayed up all night to write that paper. And then just to get a few moments of sleep, I actually checked into a hotel room in the Union. And so I was like, oh dear God, it's done, right? I've gotten that far, and I got an A. But he also wrote on it, he said, there's a lot of research here, a lot of good work, but one long run-on sentence after another makes this terribly difficult going. And that was the first time I actually felt that a professor had seen me as a writer, because I was good. I was a good writer. I was a good student. And so they didn't worry about me. And Ben did, right? He took the time to take me to task. And that was the moment when I knew I'd really found a mentor. And he really was a wonderful mentor. And I feel privileged to have worked with him and to have known him. But I do want to tell one more story, because I had kind of forgotten about it until something someone else mentioned. I bought a car from him once. This was interesting, right? So it was the ugliest car I've ever seen. Possibly Jude Richter's Yugo was worse, but other than the Yugo, it was this big old station wagon with the fake wood paneling. Yeah, terrible car. I bought it for him for $250. He actually was going to charge me $200, but I felt guilty, so I said, how about $250? It was pretty much coated in dog hair. And he had fixed the front windshield with shoe goo. Kid you not. It was quite the car. It certainly was easy to find in a parking lot, right? But the thing about it is, it was again one of those examples of generosity that we've been talking about, and kindness. He knew I needed a vehicle. He had this thing kind of laying around. He probably got it fixed up a little bit before he sold it to me. I sold it a year later for $200. I will always remember Ben, and I'll always remember that dang car. And now I will introduce Sam Fagerstein, who first met Ben as a graduate student in 2016. As the years went by, Sam and Ben became close personal friends. Ben was Sam's mentor in both academia and life.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes because as Ben would have wanted, this is just an outline, it's not a speech. Those of you who took this class know we weren't allowed to pre-write any answers, right? I just wanted outlines. So it's just okay. So when I first got here in 2016 as a master's student, I had a vague idea that I wanted to do Russian studies. And I talked to a PhD student who was my kind of graduate student mentor at the time, and he told me that Ben Eklof is very intimidating. Now, I had a hard time believing that because in my preparation, I had read some of Ben's writing, read some of his his big state of the field articles that he used to write, which are just the best still. And the one thing that I love about Ben's writing is how unpretentious it is, how humble it is. He's just the best, most clear writer. And I just had a hard time believing that the guy that wrote these like humble, erudite essays was going to be, rudely intimidating. But that was the impression. That was what I was warned of. The first time I met him was in Imperial Russian History Colloquium, late Imperial Russian History. And we were all sitting there. He came in 5 minutes late. Stepan was there. He sat down. He was wearing a big oversized fisherman's sweater that was all stretched out at the collar. He kind of looked a bit of a mess, messy hair. He took out an apple and a pocket knife. He started cutting the apple and eating it off the knife. And I thought, okay, or maybe he isn't. But no, we very quickly became close friends. I think the first time I had an independent conversation with him, he asked me what I was planning on doing. And I told him, I have a vague interest in Russian peasantry, just like he does. And he said, it's like, you're Jewish, maybe you should do Jewish studies. And I was like, well, I've grown up Jewish. I'm not, it's like, I don't want to be pigeonholed into that. And he said, but there's a lot of money in Jewish studies. And I said, I feel like that was kind of anti-Semitic. We laughed, and from that point on, that was like my second week. We laughed, and from that point on, I think we knew that we had a kinship. So we became fast friends. We had a shared love for running. By the time I met him, he was no longer running, but he never let me forget how much better his marathon time is than mine ever will. Does anyone know his fastest marathon time? 2:44. Just outrageous. I mean, that is so fast. I will never, of course, I will never run that fast. But he was always there for me as a mentor in academia at first, and then in life. He was just my favorite as an advisor, because if I went into a meeting with him feeling unprepared, it was so easy to get him sidetracked. All I had to do was ask him for a story from the Soviet Union, a story from Cape Cod, smuggling hashish through Russia in the 1970s, or meeting Kurt Vonnegut at a party at his family's house in Cape Cod, and condescendingly telling him why the war in Vietnam was wrong, only the next day to realize he was talking to Kurt Vonnegut. One of my biggest regrets about Ben passing now is that he didn't write any memoirs. In the past few years, every time I spoke with him, I said, you need to write memoirs. He thought, he was so humble, I mean, he was like, why would I do that? But obviously he just lived such an amazing life. He was great with advice, both real practical advice and also ridiculous advice, like the night before my oral exam, my comprehensive exam, which thanks to him had 500 books on it, I was feeling very nervous, and I just happened to see him as I was walking home from campus, and he asked me what I was doing today. And I said, I'm reading, my exam's tomorrow. And he said, don't read. Why don't you get drunk and have sex with Lacey? It was my wife. And I thought, he is not a normal professor. But in reality, he was always there for me, always there to help me. And when things changed for me, when I had a baby, when COVID interrupted my research plans for going to Russia, that's 5 minutes. he helped me through a very, very difficult time of kind of re-navigating my career and figuring out what I really wanted to do. I'm going into high school teaching now. I'm still ABD, maybe one day I'll finish my dissertation, but he was so supportive and really convinced me that I was doing the right thing. And his advice about being a parent is also, it sticks with me still. So if there's one thing that I just want to say about Ben, and I think everyone here can feel this to some extent, is that if you were Ben's friend, you felt lucky, you felt chosen, because, and I think everyone here probably knows what that feels like to be chosen by Ben. And I'll never forget that feeling. It'll stick with me forever. And I just wish that I could still talk to him, because he just gave me so much help in life. So that's what I have. So now we have a virtual speaker, Michael Kopajans. First met Ben as a graduate student in spring semester of 2003 in his legendary introduction to the professional study of history, and went on to take a colloquium in Imperial Russian history with him, as well as serving as a teaching assistant for his undergraduate Soviet history course. So welcome, Michael Kopajans.
Hello, everybody. I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so this is Eurovision calling from Finland here. It's like 1 a.m., so you have to excuse me a little bit I'm a little out, but just listening to everybody share their thoughts and memories about Ben. I had a similar things to say, you know. It was just 2 years in grad school where I was in close contact with him, but most of you know, if you're ever been a grad student, 2 years is a lifetime. So and like many of you said, Ben also took me under his wing as a mentor, teacher. He had a connection with my undergraduate mentor, Larry Holmes, who also recently passed away. So it's been a hard year in that regard. But one of the things I noticed about Ben was, he was very caring and, almost fatherly, but also not lenient in any way, and quite frank and no BS when it came to critiquing your writings, and always good with advice as well. But I noticed the kind of the little things that he showed interest in you and the personal side, not just in the academic side. And he also was willing to share those things as well with you, his kind of personal side. Um, let's see. When talking with Colleen Moore about his passing, we were kind of reminiscing a bit, and similar to previous speaker, this idea of being chosen by Ben to be a friend just came to mind, that it was, Ben was super busy, and he was always 1,000 million things he was doing. But when he was kind of focused in on you, um, it made me feel like the sun, was directed towards you, and kind of his warmth and that kind of magic there. Um, Having said that, I think a week later I was teaching, and I realized that I inadvertently maybe somewhat linked him as well with if you're familiar with the film Burnt by the Sun. So somehow I compared him to Stalin, somehow, I don't know, that he was like the sun, but not in that way. So but that warmth, that direct, when you got the full on Eklof experience there. And since it's come up, this is my last chance to say that you know, Ben helped me as well. When I left IU, I moved to Finland to kind of pursue a life here, and he was kind enough to break his rule about buying used cars from foreign students, and he bought my car. Unfortunately, I turned out years later, a year later, I talked to Colleen about it, and she said my car was a total lemon, and he had given it to one of his daughters. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to apologize. I'm sorry that my car was a lemon. I didn't, I had no idea it was gonna just fall apart once you took over. So this was kind of get that off my chest. And I'd asked the mechanic, he pointed me to, and mechanic had given me a quote, but he gave me the top dollar quote. And Ben realized that only after he had promised to pay that. And I tried to negotiate with him that, hey, just pay me half that. But he refused. He paid me the full, I can't remember how much it was, but it basically saved me for my first year in Finland, allowed me to kind of survive there. So I'm probably over the 5 minute limit here. Um, the last thing I just wanted to say was about the coming from the round table. A lot of the professors talked about how Ben was always a collaborator, always looking for people to kind of work with. And I don't know how many of you he tried to get into Soviet textbooks, but there was the one meeting in his office where he was giving me Soviet textbooks for that idea of maybe becoming a collaborator. So and that kind of stays with me a bit, but I'm not sure who I'm supposed to intro here. But what's the next step? Do I just, I think there's some comments being read, but I don't think it's going to be by me.
Yeah.
So maybe I shut off from here and thank you again to all the organizers and including me. So I'll go for now. Thank you.
Robert Schneider, if you are there with us and would like to read your comments, please feel free. And otherwise, we're happy to read your comments here, for the group.
Right? Yeah, I thought they were gonna be read. I don't really have them in front of me. I have to.
No, you're good. We just saw you there and wondered if maybe you.
Okay, I know you caught me unawares, but go ahead. If you have the text, go ahead.
Yep, we do.
Hey, Rob, it's Colleen. I'm gonna read them.
Thank you, Colleen.
Yeah, no
I
problem.
trust you. I trust you.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm just looking for your, okay. So Rob Schneider met Ben when he joined the history department in 2005. He was a wonderful colleague who soon became a valued friend. We, not me, Rob, we, my wife Sarah and I, were privileged to see Ben in New York just a couple of weeks before he died. And although he was not in good form, clearly suffering, as well as frustrated with the local healthcare system, still it was the essential Ben as we knew him, and will continue to remember him. And perhaps what we will remember most and have cherished most over the years is simply Ben's personality, which is to say his very presence, which never failed to lift our spirits, to engage us, to entertain us with his wonderful patter, his brilliant conversational style, and something rare among academics, especially those of the male species, his readiness not only to talk, but also to listen. He was, as we say in Yiddish, a first-class schmoozer. There was a generosity about Ben, by which I mean not only in being charitable, which of course he was, but in the sense of sharing himself with others, the mark of true friendship. He could be confessional, but never maudlin or self-indulgent. And just as he shared himself with his friends, he also invited a similar intimacy. And refreshingly, in the often oh so serious world of academia, there was a playful, even mischievous side to Ben that never failed to delight. Ben wasn't merely an academic, a really important historian in his field. He was also an intellectual with a wide range of interests and a scope of knowledge, which, however, he never flaunted. Ben and I are roughly of the same generation. Again, that's Rob, not me. And it always gave me pleasure to compare notes about the great historians, the luminaries of our profession, whom we knew. He at Princeton, me at Michigan. A generation of influential historians, the memory of whom is now fading, especially among younger historians. I will miss that generational connection, which is increasingly rare as our cohort proceeds to shuffle off this mortal coil. And now Ben, one of the best of us, has departed. Mostly like all of us here, I will just miss Ben, friend and colleague, whose very presence could make my day. As we say in my tradition, may his memory be a blessing. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
I will be reading comments from Yolanta Mescute. Yolanta first met Ben as a graduate student in fall 2003. In summer 2004, she served as Ben's teaching assistant in the undergrad course Heroes and Villains in Russian History. And in spring 2005, she took Ben's graduate colloquium on Imperial Russian history. Afterwards, they were friends. So I will read these remarks from Yolanta's perspective. I'm writing these notes in Lithuania, a country surrounded by two friendly states, Poland and Latvia, and two aggressive dictatorships, Russia and Belarus. To my deep chagrin, every day brings bad news to my corner of the world. Sometimes there's so much of it, one's senses grow dull. But thanks to Ben, I look at the craziness in my part of the world from a calmer viewpoint, because I have the historical background to understand the new developments better. After all, I did an Imperial Russian history course with Ben, and there's so much of imperial thinking in the way Putin talks about Ukraine and the rest of the former Soviet Union. I have to admit, Ben's death shook me up. It was premature. I knew he was a fighter in his heart, and I honestly thought he'd make it through. Ben was a wonderful teacher and a real mensch. I cherished him for his deep knowledge of history, for his wisdom, sense of humor, and love of people. I appreciated his genuine interest in his students' well-being. Ben could give some really good practical advice, though being young at the time, I don't think I appreciated it as much as I should have. And Ben was kind-hearted, not only smart. What an amazing combination of qualities. I still use the wrist gadget he gave me to alleviate my wrist pain. I still recall his many other acts of kindness. Ben was always ready to go the extra mile for his students and friends, teaching us by example to be kind to others. I will miss him greatly. I wish he had stayed with us longer. Ben, student from Lithuania. Oh, sure. Okay, and we have some more comments from Khalil Muhammad. Ben was my favorite senior colleague in the IU history department. I had many peer friends on campus, but no one like Ben. His office was across from mine, and I can't remember a day on campus when he didn't check in on me, to say hi, to talk politics, to ask about my life in Bloomington, the whitest place I ever lived. And to give sometimes unsolicited advice about everything. After I left, Ben stayed in touch with me much better than I did with him. He visited me at my new gig in NYC and made sure to introduce me to Emma and Tamara. He treated me like an extended member of the family, and I regret not being more available to him during his last days. We loved each other, and I take some comfort in knowing that through his daughters and grandkids, I will stay connected to him. That's so should we do? Okay. So now at this point, we have a little bit of time to invite comments from audience members who have been moved over the course of the last couple hours to say something. So please, I'll just try to navigate this as best as I can. If anyone would like to say something, feel free just to raise your hand. Yes.
So I'm Alex Lichtenstein. I've been in the history department since 2011.
And I actually am housed in Khalil's old office, which meant that Ben was one of my close hall buddies. So if you in academia know what I mean, you have people with offices next to you, they become your hall buddies. You might not socialize with them, outside, but when you're in campus, in your office, this is the person you talk to. Lynn, I want to assure you that Ben remembered so fondly that seminar with 26, as he told the students. Because one of the first things he told me in one of our first conversations was, things around here aren't like they used to be. Back in the 1990s, I had a graduate seminar just on the Russian peasantry with 26 students in it. How I miss those days. And that story has really always stuck with me. And I miss those days too. So thank you, Ben, for giving me that story. Thank you, Lynn, for showing that it was not apocryphal and actually a date and place on it. And yeah, that's my memory of Ben, and that's my hope.
Thank you very much.
Folks, I'm Maria Bucher. I'm also a colleague of Ben's, and we've heard some stories about mentoring as students. I have just a tiny one as a colleague, but I wanted to tell a story that I heard in December when we were at ASSI's, and will remind me if I'm getting this wrong. But this is from somebody who was at IU when Ben interviewed. And I'm not gonna spill all the beans because some of it, is a little bit too much. And this is not advice to graduate students, it's just like how Ben was, right? So Ben shows up for the talk, for the interview. And number one, he doesn't have his paper printed out. This is at a time where we don't have the internet. So basically he had to have his wife telefax it. If you remember what those things were, on these crazy pieces of paper that were blue and got smudged as the printing happened. And so he went from having something that was written down to sort of improvising, along the way, because he couldn't read his own paper because it was smudged. And then the other part of it is that apparently you have a tie for this interview thing, which apparently you're supposed to have a tie for even then. And so I think it was a graduate student, right? Lola, do you remember? Thank you, it was Don. Don Raleigh. Thank you. So Don loaned him a tie. So this is bad. Amazing, because he was so wonderful, none of these things matter. And the other thing I was just gonna say is, Ben was somebody who, as soon as I got to IU, figured out a way to mentor me, even though it wasn't his job or anything, but it was okay, so you went to school in Eastern Europe and you know something about it, and I'm writing this chapter about education in Russia and Eastern Europe. Let's co-author this thing together. And I was I'm not even an I don't literally, I lived there before I came here, and I went to school, and that's my expertise. And so I got on it and I studied and I did the research and I wrote with him, but it was just generosity, the generosity you're all talking about in terms of just not holding back ever, giving as much as possible of yourself. So thank you, Ben.
Thank you. About the gossip stories, one thing that was also really great for sidetracking Ben was to ask him to talk shit. So no one feel bad about sharing gossip. I don't think you would mind. Yeah, please.
My name is Ilya Otsekin, and we were close friends with Ben in the last year of his life. And actually, he helped me a lot. He was very supportive and showed around things in Bloomington. I was impressed by the fact that everyone knows Ben. Wherever he came, he started talking to people, or he met acquaintances. So that's not because Bloomington is a small town. That's because Ben is like that. And that was not an easy year for him. And I'm just talking to introduce that picture of Ben I made, where Ben is represented at Tatiana's porch. And that was more or less the last time I saw him before he was sent to New York City by train. At that time, it was probably dangerous to fly. And much have been told today about his achievements and his qualities as a teacher, scholar, writer. For me, all of that was important, and he was generous sharing his stories from his Soviet experience. I appreciated that so much about him smuggling blue jeans to 1970s Soviet Union and KGB surveillance. That was interesting. At some point, he got access to some KGB documents from the old time. But what was most important in my experience then was that in spite of all his pain fighting cancer the last year, he was really a happy person. I saw him being amidst a dense network of his friends and multiple exes. And his art of being a happy person, that's something we should learn.
Thank you. I just want to say, I forgot to, I lost my composure earlier. I want to say, Russ, you're awesome, fantastic jobs. I just want huge shout out to the. Fantastic job. It's just amazing.
Yes, please.
My name is Anna Mueller, and I came to you in 2003 as an international student straight from Poland to study here. It was an incredible honor to be admitted here. I was very happy, but just a week before I was admitted, I found out that I'm pregnant with my first child. So I wasn't sure whether I should come or not, and it was a very difficult decision to come and start, barely speaking English, coming here as a graduate student. I was really welcomed by everyone. History department, Maria welcomed me. She created this incredibly welcoming space. Marcia Shore was here as well. She was also very welcoming. And my first class was my first sort of graduate experience in the States was Ben's class. It was introduction to studying history. It was very challenging. I was super shy, scared of like even opening my mouth in class, afraid that I cannot handle the heavy readings. And of course I was pregnant. So I was pretending the entire time that I'm just not pregnant. Nobody knows. I'm not talking to anybody. It's just not happening, right? And my daughter was due in December, so just after the first semester. Ben somehow found out that I'm pregnant. I have no idea how, but he knew. And the last class of that graduate seminar, he organized a baby shower. I didn't even know what baby showers were. And I had like no clothes. I was super poor. I had no clothes. I had nothing for this child, right? I didn't even have a crib. And here I am like walking to my last class, and there is this party, and it's for me. And it was just I felt like at this moment Bloomington became home, and it was just incredible. And I have another story that I will share. I didn't want to share, but I'll share it. So the end of this class, I wrote a graduate paper, and Colleen knows this because she heard this a million times from me and from Ben. So I wrote this paper, and I knew it's a terrible paper. Like, this was like my 9th month of pregnancy. I was asleep most of the time. I had no idea what's going on. But I wrote this paper, submitted it. Ben gave me some kind of classes, and I passed the class. Yes. And then she kept telling me, every time she saw me, he would tell me this was the best graduate class paper I've ever read. Like, this is not true, but fine. Thank you. 40 years. Every time he saw me at ACES, he would say, and you wrote this wonderful paper. And then what was it?
It was 2017 in Chicago.
2017, he saw me. He's like, by the way, I read your paper again. It's not that good.
Would anyone else like to hear? Yes, please.
I'll share a very quick anecdote. So as you know, technology was sometimes Ben's kryptonite. And one day I got a phone call from his cell phone, right? And that's what my caller ID said. And I was like, hey, what's up? And they were like, who's this? It was not Ben. And I'm like, this is Colleen Moore, who's this? And they said, we're this horse farm on Russell Road. Somebody found this phone in the road and brought it into the horse farm. And I'm like, well, I know whose phone it is, I'll go get it, right? So I go to this horse farm, like giving lesson, I don't know, it's like 9 in the morning or something. I pick up the phone, I call Ben from his own phone, which is very confusing to him, right? No one's missing the phone, I call his office, and he's like, you know, what are you doing with my phone? He put the phone on top of his car. And it's down there, like halfway down Russell Road, and then fell off in front of the first one. But, so I bring him the phone at work on campus, and then he's like, I don't understand why they called you. And they said, well, I was probably the last person you called. And he said, well, why didn't they call Emma? She's my number one in my contacts. And I was like, I don't know, Ben, like he could not rattle it. He just didn't go to his favorites and call his daughter and then said, oh,
Anyone else would, who would like to share? Yes, please.
Well, my name is Claude DeBraw. I first met Ben back when his Tomo was at EDLC as one of these teachers. And got to know him pretty well. We were going to a party at his house one night when he was living on South Lincoln, and had a real nice time. Just have drinking a little wine and enjoying the girls. And somebody had the idea to put the TV on, and they put on the movie Dirty Dancing. I don't know why, but we ended up watching this movie, and after the movie was over, we all drank some more wine and just started dancing. Got to a number of years later, started riding with him, and he was a wonderful person to ride with. He was very chatty when he was, but he always had something very interesting to say, so it was fun to listen to him. And one time when one of the days when we were riding, he looked at me and said, Bob, the strap on your helmet is too loose. You gotta tighten that strap. Your helmet's gonna fall off the back of your head if you don't tighten up that strap. I said, I will, man, I will. Okay, I promise I'll tighten up the strap. So we got to a stop, and he said, okay, we're ready to stop. Tighten up your strap. So I took the helmet off, and I tightened the strap. And I put the helmet on and said, that looks much better.
And we have time for a couple more comments if anyone would like to share. Well then, I suppose we can have some concluding remarks and a final music selection. Thank you, Ellen.
Okay, thank you all for your patience. I know we've gone a bit over time. But thank you all for being here today. I'm surprised, but shouldn't be at how far some folks traveled for the memorial. Thank you for making this a priority and for all the time, money, energy spent joining us today in person or virtually. So first of all, thank you to Ben Eklof for bringing us all together. I've been looking forward to spending time with all of you since he passed to memorialize him and celebrate his life. A huge thank you to Ben's daughters, Toma and Emma, who asked us to put together a Bloomington Memorial and put their trust in us in doing so. Thank you guys. Thank you for caring for your dad his whole life, and especially during his battle with cancer. And then thank you to Nadia, who I know cared for Ben's mother during her own sickness and passing. And he always spoke very highly of that, and then also cared for Ben in his final years, and especially during his time in New York City. Thank you to Edie, as has been mentioned, for her steadfast support of Ben during his final years, attending countless doctor's appointments and checking in on him all the time, keeping track of his comings and goings, and Edie lovingly put together that perfect playlist that you've been listening to a little bit, and we hope you can listen to it anytime going forward and remember Ben. And thank you for all of your support in planning a memorial that we know Ben would have loved. Thank you so much to Mark Trotter and his IU colleagues. He spearheaded this memorial concept here in Bloomington and graciously helped us reserve the space, gathered REI and other funds from across the university to provide the refreshments, and provided sage planning advice at every part. And he put together the printed programs that you guys have as memorabilia, solicited Stepan's extremely helpful Zoom and recording assistance. Thank you, Stepan. And kept the planning committee on track, nudging us to meet. And then thank you to Colleen for planning not one, but two memorials for Ben, including the roundtable at AC's. She's very wise, thoughtful, flexible, and a whiz at all the details and logistics. Having her help with planning has made everything feel doable. Just copying her in on the emails made me feel at peace. Thank you so much. And thank you to Sam, who's been a source of deep and kind encouragement since I first called him for advice about whether or not to fly to New York. And finally, as I left Ben's hospital room in October and departed for the Newark airport, I apologized profusely to my Uber driver for holding him up and explained why. He shared that his mother had died of cancer a few years earlier, and he had not been able to go home to say goodbye. We spent the next 45 minutes sobbing together, separately, but together. We hugged when he dropped me off. It was a very Eklof interaction with a stranger. In the same way, I hope that we can all keep each other company as we grieve and celebrate separately and together. Round of applause to all the people I thank. Mark. Thank you. And then we know most folks, we hope will join us for dinner and drinks at Nick's. Please head on over, car, walk, however you'd like to get there. And then just snag tables as you can and mention that you're part of this party. We hope our tables will be close together and we hope we can chat and celebrate into the night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully, they didn't let us take reservation, so. Oh, go ahead. Hopefully.